This was Diego Lopes after losing his fight with Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 314. And if you have been on social media at all, and you follow the UFC news or update pages, you've probably seen the footage of an absolutely heartbroken Diego Lopes after his fight with Volk. And this right here probably has to be one of the hardest parts of being a UFC fan. Watching a fighter that you genuinely like and have grown attached to come up short and not being able to win. And this only gets harder the longer you watch the sport. I have been watching the UFC for around 10 years now. The first fight I ever watched was Conor McGregor versus Chad Mendes back in 2015. And I have watched almost each and every single fight night and pay-per-view since then. And over the last 10 years, I've had my heart broken more times than I can count. Because when you watch the sport for long enough, eventually you become a fan of a lot of fighters. When Leon Edwards beat Kamaru Usman, I was absolutely heartbroken and left speechless. When Israel Adesanya lost to Alex Pereira, I remember Israel Adesanya looking unbeatable, then boom, Alex out of nowhere. When Alexander Volkanovski lost to Ilya, this hurt the most, as Volk is probably my favorite fighter both in and out of the octagon. But in all my years watching the fights, the most heartbreaking one that I have probably ever seen was when Gilbert Burns lost to Kamaru Usman. I remember genuinely shedding some tears when this happened. And it's not even the losses that sting really bad sometimes. It's the ones with history and or story. For example, Tony Ferguson. This guy was on top of the world at one point, with an absolutely unbelievable record, not only beating, but dominating the competition and the people at the top at the time. Then Tony Ferguson has a freak accident where he trips over a cable the week he is supposed to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov, where he tore his knee apart. He would come back to win 2 fights after this, but you could tell that he wasn't the same fighter. Then he fought Justin Gaethje. Gaethje beat him down in one of the worst ways possible. I believe Tony Ferguson even broke his orbital in this fight. Then he went on an 8-fight losing streak. And I do genuinely believe that that Justin Gaethje fight took years off his career. And keep in mind, we could list heartbreaking moments and hard times all day. And this is the stuff that only has to do with fighting. It doesn't include the passing of people like Anthony Rumble Johnson, who was gone way too soon, and Elias Theodorou, who's also gone way too soon. But with all the heartbreak and all the sadness that comes with being a fight fan, there's also a lot of happiness. For example, when Volk won his title back at UFC 314, I was very happy for him, but I was also sad for Diego Lopes. When Dricus had beat Sean Strickland, I was happy for Dricus because I've been a fan since the beginning, but I was also sad for Sean Strickland because I genuinely became a fan of the guy. When Islam had beat Renato Moicano, I wanted Renato to win, and it to be some kind of Rocky story, but Islam proved why he's the pound-for-pound #1 fighter on the planet. And I was happy for Islam, because we get to see his reign continue. And once again, the list could go on. But I think being a fight fan isn't always sadness, and it isn't always sunshine and rainbows. It's definitely bittersweet at times. Keep in mind, most of the times I'm happy as a fight fan. 99% of the time I'm happy. But that 0.1% of the time, it definitely stings just a bit. And over the last 10 years, I have grown to like a lot of fighters. In fact, most of them. And with social media, it's so much easier to not only fall in love with the fighter inside the octagon, but outside the octagon as well. Whether it's podcasts such as Joe Rogan's podcast or Rampage's podcast, videos from the official UFC YouTube channel leading up right to the fight, or videos from the fighter themselves, like Volk has an amazing channel where he talks about fighting and for his other passion, which is cooking. Or even if it's just crazy Sean Strickland posting on social media like Instagram, or interviews with people like Nina Drama. The sport has grown so much since I've started watching, and it's crazy. And with the growth of the sport means a lot more talented fighters and a lot more fighters in general. And I would make a list of my favorite fighters, but we've done enough lists for this video and we would be here all day. And in a personal note, When I first started watching the UFC, I really only rooted for certain fighters. And it was usually the guys at the top, the people who were really popular, and I often did what early fans do, jump from fan wagon to fan wagon. Then after watching the sport for probably around 3 years, I started taking MMA and jiu-jitsu classes for about 2 years, all while watching the fights. And I started to appreciate every single aspect of the sport, whether it was the striking or the wrestling or the grappling. I realized how hard these fighters work and how good they actually have to be in the UFC and step foot in that octagon on Saturday night. And they put so much work into being a fighter, whether it's training inside the gym or actually sparring, working on technique, or whether it's their diet and nutrition that needs to be perfectly dialed in. And it also takes them years of dedication and hard work to even get to the UFC. And most people look at them like fighters, but these people are genuinely professional athletes of the highest level. Yeah, their main sport is fighting, but they have to have good strength, conditioning. They have to be a well-rounded athlete in order to be a well-rounded fighter. And when I realized all this, I began to start to root not just for a few fighters, but for all of them. I began to just enjoy the fights as a whole rather than just focusing on one particular fighter. And now I have respect for all fighters and anybody who steps inside that octagon. And I am genuinely a fan of almost everyone. And that's what makes it so much harder. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know, what was the most heartbreaking moment for you as a UFC fan? What was the hardest loss you've experienced as a UFC fan? Was it Sean Strickland losing? Was it Volk losing? For me, it was definitely Alexander Volkanovski losing to Ilya. I remember I had rooted for Alexander Volkanovski from the moment he got into the UFC all the way to now. I remember people hating on him when he was coming up and he fought Max Holloway. I remember the controversy where people thought Max Holloway got robbed, and then Volk comes back to beat him, again. I have followed Alexander Volkanovski ever since he got to the UFC. And when I seen Alexander Volkanovski dominate the division and everyone. And when Ilya went out there and knocked him out, I was absolutely speechless, flabbergasted. And I don't even use that word that often. But I remember sitting there in complete shock and just thinking, holy hell. And I was absolutely devastated. But I was also excited for Ilya because I had seen how good Ilya was. I thought Ilya was going to be champion. And sure enough, he became champ. But he had to beat my favorite fighter in order to do it, which sucked. But I was also happy for Ilya at the same time. Anyways, that's going to do it for this one. I hope you did enjoy the video. If you did, please be sure to give it a like, comment, and subscribe, as it really does help the channel grow. I would like to hit 10,000 subscribers by June, so if you want to help me out with that, I'd appreciate it. If you know or have any idea on any topics for the future, put those down below. That helps me very much. And if you guys have any ideas on how I could improve the videos, let me know. That does help a lot as well. Anyways, love you guys. See you next time, and bye-bye.